What do you get when you mix a Trump-supporting, gun-owning, pro-life advocate with the sun-soaked politics of Florida? Meet Byron Donalds.
I'm Leah, excited to dig into today's topic.
And I'm Garrett, ready to keep it chill as we explore this one.
Welcome to Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett.
Today, we're diving into the multifaceted world of Byron Donalds.
Okay, quick story to kick us off. I caught a recent segment about Byron Donalds' stance on climate policy, and he rejects the idea that climate change is caused by humans, saying the science isn't settled. My group chat erupted. A couple friends argued that Florida's insurance market shows we need to price in climate risks now, while another said mandates can get too heavy-handed and hurt homeowners. It turned into a real back and forth about science, policy, and pocketbook realities. For me, it highlighted how Donalds draws strong reactions, but also forces a conversation about balancing risk, regulation, and affordability. Let's set the scene. Byron Donalds is a U.S. representative from Florida's 19th Congressional District, which covers much of southwest Florida. He's closely aligned with what people call the MAGA wing of the Republican Party. MAGA, to define it, stands for Make America Great Again, and refers to the movement shaped by Donald Trump's priorities. Before Congress, he served in the Florida House. Think of him as a political chameleon within the conservative movement. Not changing core beliefs, but moving from Tea Party activism to the House Freedom Caucus and into the MAGA era, adapting to each chapter's style while keeping limited government and culture-forward themes.
Yeah, and the rise was pretty swift. He served in the Florida legislature from 2016 to 2020, chaired an insurance and banking subcommittee, and then ran for Congress in 2020 to succeed Republican Francis Rooney. The primary in that district matters a lot because it's strongly Republican. He won a crowded 9-way primary by just 770 votes, then beat Democrat Cindy Banyai in the general. Once in Congress, he emphasized water quality for Southwest Florida. Early on, media tagged him with the Freedom Force label, a conservative counterbrand to progressive groups. And in January 2023, he was repeatedly nominated for Speaker during that marathon series of votes, which put him on the national radar fast.
Rewinding to the early days, he was born in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, of Jamaican and Panamanian heritage and raised by a single mom. He moved to Florida for college and experienced a faith conversion in his early 20s, becoming a born-again Christian after an experience while working at a Cracker Barrel. Professionally, he built a finance background, starting as a credit analyst at TIAB Bank, moving up to senior credit and commercial lending roles, and later working in portfolio management and as a financial advisor. Politically, he left the Democratic Party in 2010, joined the Republican Party, and got involved with the Tea Party movement, which focused on limited government and lower taxes. He first ran for Congress in 2012 and lost, but that race introduced him to the district's voters and donors and set the stage for 2020.
Fast forward to that 2020 run. It was a 9-person GOP primary, and there was even a wave of anonymous text messages claiming he was dropping out, which he publicly called illegal and false. He won the primary by a hair, and then the general by a wide margin, typical for that district. In Congress, he branded himself pretty boldly, even calling himself a Trump-supporting, gun-owning, liberty-loving, pro-life, politically incorrect black man. That line became a kind of calling card. He also joined or aligned with conservative groups like the House Freedom Caucus, a bloc of Republicans who push for limited government and stick together in leadership fights. Now, the middle chapter is where positions and headlines stack up. On climate, he rejects the idea that humans are the primary cause of recent warming, and he criticized factoring climate risk into Florida insurance pricing. For folks who don't follow insurance, underwriting is how companies assess risk to set premiums. He has argued climate risk shouldn't drive those prices the way some European reinsurance companies do, and critics say that underestimates hurricane and sea level risk. On immigration, he introduced the Reform Immigration Through Biometrics Act in 2023 to require fingerprints, facial images, and iris scans for all travelers to the U.S. Biometrics are unique physical identifiers used to verify who you are. He later reintroduced it as H.R. 8371. He also opposes the current interpretation of birthright citizenship, the idea that you're a citizen if you're born on U.S. soil, and in 2025, he said due process is a privilege for American citizens. Due process, simply put, is your right to fair procedures before the government can take life, liberty, or property. Legal scholars generally say many due process protections apply to persons, including many non-citizens, so his stance drew pushback. He was also blocked from joining the Congressional Black Caucus in 2021, which became its own story about partisanship and representation.
Education policy is another big thread. In the Florida legislature, he supported charter schools and school vouchers. Quick definitions. Charter schools are publicly funded but independently run. Vouchers let public funds follow a student to private schools, including religious ones. He backed bills that expanded charter funding methods and made it easier to challenge school instructional materials. In 2017, he helped enable broader challenges to school library books and textbooks. Supporters saw this as parental oversight, critics saw it as opening the door to censorship. There's also the family angle. His wife, Erica, runs Optima Ed, a charter management company. An audit covering 2020 to 2023 found Optima schools funneled taxpayer dollars to affiliated companies in which she had ownership stakes. Supporters say those vendor relationships can be lawful and common, but it drew scrutiny, and 3 Optima-run schools later canceled their contracts, citing insufficient investment by the company. One planned school in Fort Myers enrolled 279 students for 2024, but then did not open, which hurt families who had planned around it.
As his profile grew, so did his national footprint. In January 2023, he was repeatedly nominated for Speaker during the leadership standoff and at one point received 20 votes, which was notable because you had 2 black nominees in the mix, him and Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader. He also voted to object to certifying some 2020 electors and later told Vanity Fair in 2023 that he believed Joe Biden was not legitimate. Courts and election officials rejected claims that would change the outcome, but that statement resonated with parts of the GOP base. On foreign policy, he's opposed funding for Ukraine, citing deficits and borrowing concerns, while strongly supporting aid to Israel during the Gaza war. In 2026, he backed the Trump administration's military action against Iran, predicting a rapid, decisive outcome, and around that time he also said he supported full-scale regime change in Cuba. On culture, in 2026, he helped found the Sharia Free America Caucus, saying Sharia has no place in the U.S. KR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, a Muslim civil rights organization, labeled it anti-Muslim and warned it could encroach on religious freedom. And on the ethics front, the Campaign Legal Center filed a 2024 complaint alleging he failed to timely disclose more than 100 stock trades, citing the Stock Act, the law requiring members of Congress to report trades for transparency. That complaint was pending at the time it was reported.
The trajectory kept climbing. In early 2024, Donald Trump floated him in the media as a possible running mate. In 2025, he announced a run for Florida governor in 2026, and Trump gave him what he called a complete and total endorsement. If elected, he would be Florida's first African-American governor. In Congress during the 119th session, he served on financial services and oversight committees, including subcommittees on digital assets and financial institutions, which fits his finance background. He also dove into oversight of disaster recovery after Hurricane Ian, pressing FEMA about using local expertise. On agriculture, he joined a small GOP group opposing a broad preemption idea called the EATS Act in the 2024 Farm Bill. Preemption means the federal government overriding state laws. In plain terms, he sided with keeping room for state animal welfare laws, like California's Proposition 12, which was a notable federalism stance for a conservative who otherwise favors deregulatory approaches. There's a difficult, lingering question to put on the table. He has said Joe Biden is not the legitimate president. Why does a claim like that carry so much weight? because it touches the core process of democracy, accepting certified election results after courts have had their say. Every court that looked at major 2020 challenges didn't find fraud that would change outcomes, and states certified results. So the question becomes, what does it do to trust in institutions if a public figure keeps saying the winner isn't legitimate?
Yeah, and I hear the point. I also think about why some voters latch on to those claims. There's a feeling for some that the system is distant or biased, and the claim becomes a way to express that mistrust. But practically, when courts, election officials, and certifications all line up, continuing to dispute the outcome can blur the line between oversight and undermining. I'm all for investigating irregularities where they exist. That's healthy. Yet at some point, not gonna lie, moving the goalposts forever can make basic governance harder and creates a loop of suspicion that's tough to exit.
Real talk. It also shifts energy away from policy debates people feel daily, like insurance costs, school quality, and immigration enforcement logistics. I'm not dismissing anyone's feelings, but I do wonder if we lose time we could spend on substance. Why not keep transparency tools strong, then pivot hard to the kitchen table issues once the processes are done?
On the pop culture side, he's been a regular on national TV, including CNN and NBC's Meet the Press. He's a familiar face at CPAC, which is a major conservative conference and media event. That visibility shapes his public persona, and honestly, it keeps him in the conversation for bigger roles. Media presence is like political oxygen these days. All right, let's try a counterfactual. What if he had won the 2012 U.S. House race in Florida's 19th? Earlier seniority could have put him in influential committee slots sooner, maybe even chairing a subcommittee by the mid-2010s. That might have changed how he engaged the 2023 speaker fight. Instead of being the emerging alternative, he could have been a broker with more institutional leverage. And his education policy brand might have matured on a national stage earlier, for better or worse, given the charter debates tied to Optima Ed.
I can see that. And if he had earlier seniority, he might have landed on financial services questions about fintech and digital assets sooner, which fit his background. That could shift his public identity from mostly a culture war lightning rod to a policy specialist with a strong cultural stance. Also, imagine Florida politics. An earlier congressional footprint could have pulled him into a governor's race sooner or set him up as a statewide surrogate during big cycles. The speaker dynamics in 2023 might still feature him, but perhaps as a behind-the-scenes dealmaker rather than a repeatedly nominated figure. Stepping back, the through line with Donalds is a mix of fiscal conservatism, strong culture positions, and a communications presence that invites both fans and critics. On policy, he supports charter schools and vouchers, opposes the Green New Deal framework, favors nuclear power and what he calls economic freedom, and takes a hard line on immigration with proposals like universal traveler biometrics. On foreign policy, he's skeptical of open-ended aid to Ukraine, but very supportive of Israel, and he backed the 2026 U.S. action against Iran. He's also not shy about controversial caucuses or statements that test legal boundaries, like his framing of due process rights. That combination keeps him influential inside the GOP and very visible outside it.
And the open questions for his future are big. How does the 2026 governor's race shape up for him? Do the charter controversies and the ethics complaint gain traction or fade? Does his stance on climate and insurance resonate in a hurricane-exposed state if premiums keep rising? Or does a limited government approach win on affordability? If he threads those needles, the path stays wide. If not, the same boldness that made him a star could become a headwind. Either way, he's a case study in how modern conservative figures build brands across state policy, Congress, and media all at once.
Stay curious, folks. This has been Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett. Until next time.